afternoon. I'm going to try it again. Good afternoon. Much better. Fabulous. Welcome to those of you here today and those who are watching us on the webcast. I'm happy to see so many of you in the room today for this great panel. So to remind people about how we do this, we have two parts of the day. So as usual, we're going to begin with Kevin Kane, our Chief Market Analyst, who's going to give us an update on housing markets, and he's going to use data from the fourth quarter of 2014 to give us a sense of how things are going. And then we're going to switch to our panel discussion, which today is on Native American housing, obstacles and opportunities, which is also the focus of our Evidence Matters issue that we're currently working on. So as many people in the room know, despite some improvements over the last 2 decades, Native Americans are still more likely to live in homes that are crowded, physically inadequate, and unaffordable when compared to the nation as a whole. Many tribal communities lack a developed housing and lending market, leaving them almost completely dependent on federal funding to address housing needs. Over the past 50 years, the federal government has sought to fulfill its obligation through a framework of self-determination, allowing tribes to develop and implement programs based on and conducive to local conditions and preferences. Our speakers today will mine data and best practices to offer a picture of how Native Americans are faring today. And to moderate this panel, we're fortunate to have with us Roger Boyd, Deputy Assistant Secretary for HUD's Office of Native American Programs, better known here as ONAP. ONAP programs provide housing funds to Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians through the Indian Housing Block Grant Program. The office also administers the Indian Community Development Block Grant Program and provides homeownership opportunities. Roger brings to this panel a wealth of relevant knowledge and experience, even beyond his current work. Before he joined us here at HUD, he was program manager at Treasury's CDFI fund, and in that role as manager of the fund, he managed the Native American program, and he designed and directed the fund's mandated Native American lending study, and also initiated the fund's Native American TA and training program. So you can picture the background he brought with him to his work here at HUD. Throughout his career, Roger has worked with Indian tribal governments, federal agencies, and the private sector to explore and develop economic development opportunities for the Native American communities with the goal of establishing self-sustaining economies. And he's an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation. So thank you for joining us here today, Roger. Before we move to the panel, I'm going to turn things over to Kevin to start us off. We threatened to keep the music on as a soundtrack.
Thank you, Dr. O'Regan. Before I begin, I just want to apologize for my appearance. Apparently, hair and makeup in the back ran out of makeup, so have to make do with what we've got here. As always, before I start, I want to thank Randall Goodnight and Wendy Ip, two of our field economists who put together all the maps that you'll see in my presentation this afternoon. Just a note about the maps, the color themes of the maps are all the same. Where brown indicates worse off conditions or declines in a variable, and blue indicates better conditions or increases. First, we're going to discuss the economy, then we'll look at the nation's sales and rental markets. The first figure shows the year-over-year percentage change. Let's get that loaded up here. First figure shows the year-over-year percentage change in non-farm payroll since 2004. Whoop. There we go. Looking at the 12-month and 3-month averages through 2014. Non-farm payrolls are a measure of the number of jobs in the economy. The 12-month average is shown in blue, and the 3-month average is shown in red. And during 2014, non-farm payrolls averaged 139 million jobs. This was up 1.9%, or 2.6 million jobs compared with a year ago. And the 3-month average through December was up by a higher rate of 2.2% from a year ago. The rates of growth have been increasing more noticeably since May of 2014. This is the first time that we've had year-over-year quarterly growth above 2% since going back to 2006. For the 15th consecutive quarter, every region in the country added jobs relative to a year ago, and the entire country's in blue. 4 regions in darker blue grew at a faster rate than the national average, and that was led by the Southwest at 3.2%. Total job gains in the nation were led by the professional and business services sector, which added 660,700 jobs. This was up 3.5%. The fastest rates of growth occurred in the construction and mining and logging sectors, which were up by 5.1% and 5% respectively. On a state level, North Dakota had the fastest rate of growth in the nation at 5.1%, and that was led by a 16% increase in the mining and logging subsector. And Texas and Utah also had rates of growth that were above 3%. Let's take a closer look at the Midwest region by metropolitan area. Year-over-year growth in this region during the fourth quarter was 1.2%, a percent below the national average. 12 out of the 69 metropolitan areas in the region grew faster than the national average, and those are shown in the two darker shades of blue. 3 of those were ranked in the top 10 metropolitan areas for non-farm growth in the nation. And it was led by Elkhart, Goshen, Illinois, which grew by 4.8%, and that's the lone dark blue dot on the screen. The light blue areas grew by less than the national average, and the 9 areas in brown had declines in employment relative to a year ago. The national unemployment rate was 5.5% during the fourth quarter. This was down from 6.7% a year ago. The 6 regions in blue had a rate that was less than or equal to the national rate, led by the Rocky Mountains at 3.6%. The 4 regions in brown had a higher rate than the national average, and that was led by the Pacific at 6.8%. And on a state level, rates ranged from a low of 2.4% in North Dakota to a high of 7.2% here in Washington, D.C. On a national level, the unemployment rate was down 1.2 percentage points from last year. The unemployment rate declined in every region of the country, all in blue, and the 4 in darker blue declined faster than the national average, led by the Midwest, which was down 1.9%. Unemployment rates declined in 49 states, including the District of Columbia. Let me give an overview of current housing market conditions. Sales market conditions remain balanced throughout much of the country. As a bit of background, balanced conditions exist when the quantity of housing supplied equals the quantity demanded. Soft markets occur when the quantity of housing supplied exceeds the quantity demanded and we have a surplus, and tight markets occur when demand exceeds supply and we have a shortage. All 3 home price indices show that home sales prices continued to increase during the fourth quarter, with the rates of gain remaining relatively stable compared with the previous quarter. Home sales decreased by 2% during the 12 months ending December 2014, and this is after a 1% decline that we saw last quarter. Inventories of new homes for sale were up by 15% from a year ago, and they were unchanged for existing homes. And based on the current rate of home sales, there's a 5.4 months supply of new homes. This is up from a 5.1 month supply a year ago, and there's a 4.4 months supply of existing homes, and that compares with a 4.6 months supply a year ago. The sales vacancy rate was 1.9% in the fourth quarter, down from 2.1% a year ago. The tightening of rental market conditions that we've been seeing over the last couple of years seems to be slowing a bit. Markets are still tightening, but it is slowing a little bit. 63% of apartments that were completed last quarter were absorbed in the fourth quarter. That compares with a 64% rate of absorption a year ago. And multifamily production increased by 4% in the fourth quarter relative to a year ago. Let's take a closer look at regional conditions. These are assessments provided by our field economists around the country. Relative to last quarter, improvements in an area are shaded in blue, and declines in conditions are shaded in brown. Sales market conditions remain relatively balanced throughout most of the country, although they have gotten tight in the Rocky Mountain region. The tightening trend that we've been seeing in the rental markets has slowed a bit, and several regions have moved to more balanced conditions. You can see those in blue. Although, again, when you look, you can see that tight market conditions do remain in most markets. Improvements were seen in New England, the Mid-Atlantic, the Southeast, as well as the Pacific. This next figure shows year-over-year change in home price indices on a monthly basis. Taking a look at the 3 major indices, all of them have shown a year-over-year price increase since early to mid-2012. In December of 2014, the S&P index, shown in blue, and the CoreLogic index in black, were up nearly 5% relative to a year ago, and the FHFA index, shown in red, was up nearly 6%. The slowing in the rates of increase seemed to be leveling off a bit during the last 2 quarters, and you can see that with the flattening of the curves to the right. It's going to be interesting to see where these curves go in the next year. This next map shows the change in the monthly CoreLogic House Price Index on a state level from 1 year ago. Nationally, the increase was 5%. The trend of price increases in every state, which began in the 3rd quarter of 2012, finally came to an end in the 4th quarter. Prices declined slightly in Vermont, Maryland, and Connecticut. Those are shown in brown. The prices in the light blue states increased by less than or equal to the national rate, and prices in the 17 dark blue states were up by more than the national average, and that was led by 8% gains in New York, Colorado, and Texas. According to the Census Bureau, the median price of a new home in the 4th quarter was $295,100. This was up 8% from a year ago, and according to the National Association of Realtors, the median price of an existing home was $207,600. This was up 6% from a year ago. Let's take a closer look at the New England region, where prices declined in Connecticut by 2% and in Vermont by 1%. Of the 17 metro areas in the region, 12 had an increase in price, with 5 areas in dark blue growing faster than the national average, and all of those in Massachusetts. And they were led by an 8% gain in Boston. The 3 areas in brown had declines, 2 of which are in Connecticut. And despite a 3% increase in the Burlington metropolitan area, the rest of Vermont had declines, resulting in a slight decline for the state overall. This next map shows the percent of home loans that are 90 or more days delinquent, in foreclosure, or an REO as of December 2014. REO stands for real estate owned, which means that the lender now owns the property. The national average was 4.6% of all loans in those 3 categories, and this was down from 5.6% a year ago. And it was also half the rate of the recent high of 9.2% that occurred in February of 2010. An interesting split across the country. The 5 regions in brown on the eastern half have a rate that's higher than the national average, while the 5 regions in blue on the western half have a rate that's below the national average. The rate is still high in New York, New Jersey at more than 8%. And for the 6th consecutive quarter, the rate declined in every region of the country and also declined in every single state. The most dramatic decline occurred in the Southeast, which was down by 1.7 percentage points to 5.9%. This was led by a 3.2 percentage point decline in Florida, where the rate is still the 2nd highest in the country at 8.3%, slightly lower than the 9.3% in New Jersey, which had a decline of 1.6 percentage points from a year ago. The rate also declined by 1.1 percentage points in New York, New Jersey, as well as the Midwest region from a year ago. The decline in the New York, New Jersey region was certainly helped by a 33% increase in REO sales. Just to put this into perspective, around the country, REO sales were down in nearly every other region, and those declines were, in most cases, by double digits. Let's take a closer look at the percentage point decline in the number of loans that are seriously delinquent or transferred to REO status by metropolitan area for the New York, New Jersey region. 14 of the 20 metropolitan areas in the region had a decline, those shown in blue. The 8 areas in dark blue declined by a rate that was faster than the national average, led by a 1.7 percentage point decline in Newark. Although 6 areas in New York had an increase, all but one of those were up by less than 1 percentage point. Based on CoreLogic data, new and existing home sales were down by 2% during 2014 compared with a year ago, with sales down in 7 regions. This is now 2 consecutive quarters that we've seen year-over-year declines in home sales. Areas in dark brown declined faster than the national average, and in the light brown areas were less than the national average. And the regions in blue had gains in sales. The largest decline occurred in the Pacific at 9%, with double-digit declines in Hawaii, Nevada, and a 9% decline in California. The Midwest was also down by 5%. The largest gains were in the Great Plains, also a gain of 5%. with relatively modest changes in all other regions. Let's take a closer look at the Pacific region, which had the largest decrease in sales in the country. In the Pacific, traditional resales were up by 2%, but new home sales were down by 8%. And in addition, REO sales were down by 34%, and short sales were down by 32%. Sales declined in all metro areas except for 3, and those 3 shown in blue. The medium brown declined by more than the national rate, and the dark brown areas declined by more than 10%, and that includes such areas as Las Vegas with a 14% decline, Honolulu down 11%, and Los Angeles and Phoenix, which were both down by 10%. Single-family home building, as measured by building permits issued, increased by 5% to 133,500 homes during the fourth quarter. Permits were up in 6 regions, led by the Southwest at 13% and the Southeast at 10%. Activity declined in 3 regions, led by 8% declines in New England and New York, New Jersey. And permits remained unchanged in the Pacific. The number of multifamily permits was up by 4% to 103,700 units during the fourth quarter, and 7 of the 10 regions had gains that were led by double-digit increases in the Pacific at 22%, the Northwest at 21%, and New England at 17%. Permits declined by 19% in both New York, New Jersey, as well as the Midwest. According to REIS data, the national vacancy rate was down just 0.1 percentage points to 4.2% in the fourth quarter relative to a year ago, with rates declining in 4 regions shown in brown, led by 0.3 percentage points in the Midwest and Great Plains. Rates increased in 4 regions and remained unchanged in 2, and those are all shown in blue. According to REIS, which covers 275 market areas across the country, vacancy rates were down in 190 market areas, they were up in 76 market areas, and unchanged in 9. The decline in vacancy rates have slowed relative to recent quarters. There were 11 markets with a decline of 2 percentage points or more in the past quarter. And according to the Census Bureau for the entire U.S., the rental vacancy rate was 7% in the fourth quarter, down from 8.2% a year ago. Let's take a closer look here at the Midwest region, where vacancy rates declined in 32 of the 43 metropolitan areas, those shown in the 2 shades of brown. 10 areas declined by more than the national average, those in dark brown, and you can see that 5 of those were in Indiana. The major metropolitan areas of the region, Chicago, Indianapolis, Detroit, Cleveland, and Milwaukee, all had declines of less than 1%. Of the 11 areas in blue, 10 had an increase in vacancy rate, and 1 of those had no change. Rents were up by 3.4% nationally, according to REIS, and rents grew in all regions of the country, the whole country in blue. The 6 regions in darker blue increased faster than the national average, led by 6.2% in the Rocky Mountains, where markets are tight. The average market rent in the fourth quarter for the 275 areas covered by REIS was $1,172. Rents increased in 258 out of the 275 areas. They were down in 13 areas and unchanged in 4. And 48 areas across the country increased by more than the national average. Let's take a closer look at the Rocky Mountain region, where rent growth was the strongest. Rents in the fourth quarter were up in 11 of the metropolitan areas, all in blue. The light blue areas increased by less than the national average. Boulder, which is shown in the medium blue, was up by 5%, and Denver, Fort Collins, and Greeley were all up by nearly 8% or more, and those shown in the darkest blue. And then we've thrown in a bonus map this time around for our discussion on Native American housing. The team put together this map showing the Indian Housing Block Grant distribution for 2015. This money is used to provide for a range of affordable housing activities on Indian reservations and Indian reserves. The states in blue received funding. Those in the darkest shade of blue received more than $20 million, while the states in brown received no funding. And with the panel discussion this afternoon, we'll hear more about the issues faced with Native American housing across the country. So in summary, Year-over-year job growth was 2.2% for the fourth quarter. Sales markets remained balanced throughout the country. Prices remained relatively stable. The price increases remained stable relative to last quarter, and total sales declined by 2%. The tightening of rental markets throughout the country seems to be slowing a little bit. However, rents are continuing to rise and vacancy rates are continuing to decline. For additional information, please go to the U.S. Housing Market Conditions website on huduser.org. You can talk with your local regional economist or field economist, or you can feel free to contact me. So now it is my pleasure to hand things over to Roger Boyd, who will be leading the panel discussion this afternoon.
Thank you and good afternoon. What a presentation. I was hoping that maybe someday, can you imagine being able to stand up here and give a comparable report on Indian country? It's a dream that I think some of us have, and hopefully it'll happen within my lifetime. But at any rate, I really appreciate the opportunity this afternoon, and I really thank PD&R for highlighting this program, especially with regard to the Native American community and housing. I think what I'd like to do is just give you a very quick overview. Some folks may not totally know what the Office of Native American Programs does and what our programs are. First of all, you may hear the term NAHASDA, and a lot of people, especially in our work, it happens every day. We talk about NAHASDA. So what is NAHASDA? Well, NAHASDA is the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act. And it was passed and developed in 1996 as amended. NAHASDA recognizes the right of tribal governance and the unique relationship between the federal government and the governments of Indian tribes established by longstanding treaties, court decisions, statutes, executive orders, and of course, in the beginning, the United States Constitution. So there's been a very long history of Native American governments throughout the country, and I think the great thing about the implementation of NAHASDA is that really sealed the relationship between the federal government, state governments, and tribal governments, and recognizing tribal governments as the government recognizes state governments, and I think sort of leveled in some circumstances the playing field of doing business. We manage about 6 programs within our organization, and it, in one way, directly and indirectly, provides funding to 566 federally recognized tribes throughout the United States, including Alaska, the lower 48, and 5 state-recognized tribes that were grandfathered into the Indian Housing Block Grant Fund. And we also have a program, a block grant program in Hawaii, which also includes a loan guarantee program. On the mainland, the core and the background of our program is the Indian Housing Block Grant. And this is a program that really provides funding every year to tribes. And the interesting thing, I believe, about the block grant program is it's based on a formula. Historically, under the Public Housing Act, tribes had to compete for these funds. And so I think what's happened is that through NAHASDA, it's leveled the playing field a little bit. And so every tribe in the country, small, medium, or large, are provided funds every year on an annual basis based on a formula. Similar to the Indian Housing Block Grant is the Native Hawaiian Housing Block Grant. And those funds go to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands every year. So that's really the recipient. In turn, then, those funds are used for housing and building housing in communities for Native Hawaiian families. Then the other program that we help manage is the Indian Community Development Block Grant, which is a portion of CDBG. Then we have, I think, which are three really great programs that really have helped tribes really develop the capacity to bring in additional or new capital within the community. And that's the Title VI program, which tribes then can leverage on a 5-to-1 ratio and bringing capital into the community. And that program is a 95% loan guarantee program. What tribes have been doing with that program is that they've been leveraging it with other federal agency funds and with the private sector, especially the low-income housing tax credits, which is really key, I think, and will remain key into future years and to bring access new capital into the community. I think the capacity building on the financial side is a big challenge for many tribes, but also many tribes have excelled in it. So what they're doing is that they're building the capacity to reach out and really compete with the private sector in accessing new capital, and that to me is going to be a very, very important key into the future of sustaining economies and sustaining communities on reservations through housing development. So with that, I am very pleased with this panel this afternoon. I think you're going to have a good, diverse panel, a good discussion. What we'd like to do is have our panelists provide their presentations. We have about 10 minutes to 12 minutes per presentation. And then we wanted to open it up for discussion. I think that that's really very, very important, because once we can listen and we can hear, but also how do we relate to each other? How do we relate to maybe your questions and answers, which we will also ask you for. And there's a good variety in our panel and a good experience. Our first panelist is Nancy Pundis. Nancy is a senior fellow at the Urban Institute, where she is experienced in policy research and project management, specializing in program evaluation, organizational behavior, cost analysis, and service delivery. She has been with the Urban Institute for 25 years. She currently directs a very important study, the Native American, Alaskan Native, and Native Hawaiian housing needs assessment. And she will talk a lot about this, but I think the very important thing about this study is that since NAHASDA was developed, there was only one study that was done, and that was in 1996. So we're really way behind the curve on updating that, and this is going to be, we are associated with PD&R in doing this, and of course the Urban Institute, and we're really looking forward to that coming out, because the new data that's going to come out of that study, I think is going to help us tremendously, not only within the administration, but dealing with members of Congress. One of the things that we have lacked a lot is really good, solid data to help us promote our programs and to provide better services to Native American communities around the country. Ms. Pundis holds a MBA from Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, and a BA in biology. It's really interesting, the conversion from biology to the Wharton School. But I'm sure there are a lot of benefits from that. She's also a certified public accountant licensed in Maryland. Please.
Thank you, Roger, and welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad that they are covering this topic at one of these quarterly meetings. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about this study. It was a congressionally mandated study to HUD to provide national level figures on housing needs and conditions. It's managed by PD&R. We're working closely with ONAP throughout the project. It started in late 2010, and they're helping us with their tremendous knowledge of the tribal programs, but also outreach to the tribes. And the study's being conducted by the Urban Institute and several subcontractors, NORC at the University of Chicago, Econometrica, and Support Services International. And I thank Roger for helping me not have to go through many acronyms, since he explained a number of them already, like NAHASDA. As Roger said, the last study was done in 1996 by the Urban Institute, and it provided a national overview at that time. It informed the debate that ultimately led to the block grant approach that was incorporated in NAHASDA. I mean, that was not the only thing that made that decision, but it did add information for that approach. And this is the first national study that's been done since NAHASDA was implemented. And since NAHASDA really changed the way federal funding for housing assistance is provided, the idea of going back and seeing what's happened since way back in 1996 is really important. It's a legislation, it's a block grant legislation, and then there's separate legislation for the Native Hawaiian block grant as a part of that legislation. So we're looking at Native Hawaiian housing conditions and needs as well. The purpose of the study is to provide clear and credible and consistent information across the country to inform policy analysis so that tribes can more effectively use resources to improve housing conditions. And as the congressionally mandated study, it really is looking at the top level picture, the national picture. Fortunately, you're going to get to hear from other panelists about what's actually going on the ground in different localities. This is like a laundry list of our data sources and study components because it's a huge study. So just to give you an idea, we're looking at secondary data, census data, and HUD administrative data files. There's an in-person household survey with a nationally representative sample of tribal areas, and then a telephone survey of tribal housing officials, which is really critical in understanding what's happened since NAHASDA was implemented, because that's who is now administering those grant funds on tribes. As well as some site visits that include in-person interviews with tribal officials as well as housing administrators. Separate studies, separate components include a survey of lenders that originate home loans in Indian country, a study of Native Americans living in urban areas, and the Native Hawaiian component, which includes interviews with administrators and stakeholders, as well as a household survey of Native Hawaiians. So those are just the many pieces of this study. I'm going to say a little bit about the sample selection and the national survey. This is often very difficult to explain when we go out to the tribes because it is a nationally representative sample. It means it's going to give us a very a carefully documented national number, but it is not really going to tell us the in-depth detail of what is happening on any particular tribe. So it's a different product, really. We did do proportional stratification by region and size using the 2010 census, and then selected tribes within each region using probability proportion to size. We have a sample of 38 tribes and a goal of completing 1,280 interviews, and a sample of 104 tribal housing offices. You might hear me referring to them as TDHEs, which is the acronym used for the tribally designated housing authorities. And then there are in-person interviews with a smaller sample that includes up to 24 sites and talking to housing program staff and community leaders. So the idea is to provide national estimates, and it's not a tribal level assessment. Tribes do, and you'll hear about some of this, and they are encouraged to undertake their own surveys for their own planning, because part of the self-determination with NAHASDA is that the tribes set their own priorities for how to use those grant funds. So they are now starting to do their own studies and their own surveys so they can do an even better job of that. The household survey is going to be asking questions and observing the exterior of household conditions. It's going to be looking at the major housing problems and needs, things that are causing or leading to greater housing needs in Indian country, whether the standards are met, and comparing them to national standards for housing and problems, the kinds of structures that are prevalent, and also asking residents about their preferences for household size, different features of housing, and things like that, which vary very, very much across the country. Quick information on the current status of the report. I wish I had more findings to present, but we're not quite there yet. We have completed an interim report, which is on the HUD user website, and that is using census and mostly census data. And just a few tidbits from that. We did learn that 6 out of 10 American Indians and Alaska Natives live in tribal areas and their surrounding counties. There's been a rise in home ownership in Indian country, but it's still much behind the non-Indian rate of 65% of home ownership. It's 54% in Indian country. There have been gains in education among Native Americans, but there's still a large gap between their education attainment and that of non-Native Americans. Households are 3 times as likely to be overcrowded and 11 times as likely to have inadequate plumbing. That's just a few tidbits about that. The other thing that you can really see from the study that was the interim report using the census data is the tremendous diversity across the country that you find, even when you look at the census data, let alone when you go out and visit the various tribal areas. In addition, next steps in the status, we've completed our survey of the TDHEs and got an 85% response rate for that. We've just gotten the data file, so that analysis is just beginning, but we're very excited because it had such a good response rate. We've completed in-person interviews with local housing officials and tribal leaders and community leaders in 21 tribal areas. And we've completed a separate study of Native Americans living in urban areas. We've completed a lender study and a study of Hawaii. In Hawaii, the survey data collection is complete. We're still working on the data file, and interviews with stakeholders are completed. So those last 3 are all reports are at some draft stage right now. So they're coming, but not quite ready yet. On the household survey in Indian country, we're really well on our way to completing the most complete national housing survey ever. Of the 38 tribes in the sample, we've completed data collection in 33, and with those that are closed out, where data collection's finished, we've gotten a 72% response rate. This took, I don't even want to say, it took a lot of work and a lot of patience. Tribal members were trained and hired to conduct the interviews in keeping with our commitment to build capacity in tribal areas. We worked extensively on outreach and in partnership with the tribes and Alaska Native villages to complete that. And one of the things that really is, besides the fact that every tribe as a sovereign nation has their own procedures, there was a lot of difficulty understanding, well, what good is this going to do for us since you're not telling me anything about my tribe? It's just part of a national survey. So I think that's something to keep in mind as we look ahead. While we don't have findings yet from that, we're compiling a really rich understanding of the varied and difficult circumstances faced by tribes. And there's just a couple of examples: backlog in meeting new construction, rehabilitation needs, overcrowding, and consequences of natural disasters. And again, this varies tremendously each place that you go to. The study itself, we do believe that these national figures, besides the fact that Congress mandated them, will mean something in terms of any kind of getting the word out about the needs and conditions, because having that national number to hang your hat on is a starting point. But at the same time, we'd really like to see more capacity being built for the tribal level surveys, sharing best practices across tribes, and linking the housing needs and conditions to economic development, which is something that NAHASA provides more flexibility than tribes have had in the past. So we're hoping that continues as well. So we're learning more about administration on the ground and the complexities that the tribes face, and we're going to hear a lot more now from two panelists who can tell you a lot more about the local conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Our next presenter is Kevin Klingbeil. He is this is interesting because I always thought he was a lawyer, but he is a lawyer, but he's also a geographer and former Indian housing lawyer, former manager for the U.S. Census Bureau during the 2010 census, and current managing director of Big Water Consulting in Seattle, Washington. Kevin has represented tribal housing clients in government-to-government consultations with the U.S. Census Bureau and, of course, with HUD. And the most recent example of that was through the negotiated rulemaking that we've been conducting over the past year and a half. And he's consulted with us, with the Census Bureau, on ongoing surveys and collection of housing-related data in Indian country. He currently serves a member of technical support group assisting in Indian housing block grant, former negotiated rulemaking committee's data study group. It was interesting, one of the things that the negotiated rulemaking committee did is that we made a decision because there was a lot of concern about other data sources or other possible data sources that would help us in the formula. And the data, the census data is very important in helping us formulate the formula for the distribution of block grant money that I talked about earlier. So we, on the committee, set up a study group to spend 12 months to look at other possible data sources, and I don't know if he'll be talking about that directly, but maybe about the whole process of data collection and the importance of data collection to help us further our programs. So without any further ado, Kevin.
Thank you, Roger, and thank everyone for coming out and those online. As Nancy was alluding to, I'm going to talk a little bit more about sort of tribal level data collection and data utilization. It's kind of an exciting time right now because a variety of different organizations are starting to take a look at the data that is available representing Indian countries. So you have NCAI through an NSF grant starting to analyze the federal data sources and different alternatives and ways of collecting data in Indian country. And you also have the proposal in the most recent budget for federal office in Interior to start to address data sources with respect to Indian country. So for someone who's involved in working with tribes directly to promote their internal capacity to collect their own data, that's kind of an exciting thing. A lot of people who sort of discuss data with respect to Indian country know that it's often discussed in the context of funding mechanisms and funding formulas. And that's somewhat unfortunate because as we all suffer through in that arena, these are funding pies, and so it essentially creates competition between tribes for limited dollars. It doesn't seek to meet actual need necessarily, it's just a certain amount of money then allocated via formula. It's sort of like identifying what would be essential to treat a patient and giving them some percentage of that, or fixing your brakes partially on a regular basis. So what we're all sort of working toward, I think, in this setting is trying to figure out ways to promote internally data collection so that tribes can develop stronger management planning practices, and then also, as I'll describe a little bit later, developing that capacity to analyze and scrutinize the data sources that describe Indian country and make sure that they're more accurate and reflect the conditions that are currently present there. But data itself also symbolizes sovereignty. It it symbolizes independence and self-determination in a data sense as well, not having to rely on another government, another entity to give you the data that describes your people and your resources and tells your story. As Carol will describe, we use information to tell the story of our tribes and of the people that we work with. But also data, as I mentioned, it sort of serves as this symbol of self-determination. The more you can do with your own data and the more you can do it to streamline and make your programs more efficient and take better care of your people, then the farther you've moved toward true self-determination and self-governance. The difficulty when relying on another data source is that you don't have the ability to look at the raw data. You don't have the ability to look at the relationships within the data, or even really analyze truly whether it's flawed or inaccurate, because it's aggregated and compiled by someone else and given to you in a different format. But the other thing about becoming self-governing or working towards self-determination in data that's really important is it promotes data literacy. Understanding what data is out there, how it describes you, and gives you that sense of that ability to determine whether or not it accurately represents you or not. I'm going to describe one example that I worked on, which was called the Dakota Housing Needs Assessment Pilot Project. And this particular project had 5 member tribes in North Dakota and South Dakota, and they represented in part 3 of the poorest counties in the United States. Now, basically, the project started out as a challenge of census data. Many of you probably know that tribes are allowed to challenge census data that's used in the formula if they feel that it inaccurately represents the needs for their tribe and for their members. And it was also meant to serve as a development of a model for data collection for census challenge purposes, or for needs assessment purposes, beyond the purpose of census challenge. So these 5 tribes conducted a mapping of all of the housing units on their reservations, and then used that map or that list, which became the survey frame, to conduct housing needs surveys on the 5 reservations. And they visited just over 3,600 housing units in that process. And they were also including, and this is an important piece of this, they included supplemental questions for each tribe, which they determined were important to them in future planning for not just housing programs, but for other programs as well. But one of the key features of this project as we went along was that in order to determine whether your challenge was going to be successful, first of all, the challenge process requires that you mirror the census essentially on your reservation and ask the same questions. But you also then have to examine, as the data comes in and you compile the data, whether or not you will be truly successful in that challenge. And one of the big problems that we were finding in analyzing the formula and the different data sources was an issue of transparency. Could we take apart, could we dissect the formula and pull it apart? And so again, this was just part of the capacity building. This is something that the Negotiated Rulemaking Committee is exploring in greater depth, so I'm not going to discuss it. I'm really just discussing the capacity building part of the project. But one of the key features of collecting data and becoming part of this data world was that the tribes then recognized that we don't need to collect data just for census challenge purposes. Why aren't we out there doing field data collection to collect whatever data we need, when we want it, and use it how we want to use it? Beyond that, they started looking around at other programs and saying, well, land and natural resources has certain data, and water resources has certain data, and even programs for education have certain data. Why can't we see that, see their maps, use that? We talk about data silos and cylinders, as Todd Richardson mentioned earlier. And so they started looking at projects to promote data integration among the programs, to maximize the data that they collect. As you all know, the various programs collect a ton of data, but it's never compiled or aggregated in one place. They're never allowed to examine the relationships between it. So that was another thing we started looking at. And then that, of course, extends to sort of the culmination, which is, why don't we have our own tribal statistical office? Somebody that can go around and collect data, analyze data, provide data for grants, for the different programs, do it impartially with verifiable practices, work with other tribes to create data collection protocols so that the data collected by various tribes can be put together in data sets. And so this is what stemmed from the Dakota Pilot Project. So I always talk about the beginning, but it's more important to talk about where it went. One caveat to this I would mention, these processes don't happen overnight, and these aren't projects that you can just write a check for. You know, there are certain construction projects and things where, you know, there's a thought that if we find the right person, we can just sort of have them do this. But this actually requires a fairly significant investment and will on the part of the tribe to get involved in training their staff and becoming data literate. It also requires them to sit down and identify what their unique concerns and interests and challenges are, as I think Nancy was alluding to. That national data sets are great, and they express sort of generalized concerns and generalized need. But each of the tribes that we're talking about here has different challenges. Carol Gore is in Alaska. I'm dealing with tribes in the Northern Plains. I live in the Northwest. They all have different issues and different concerns. So part of this project is recognizing that you need to be able to articulate your specific challenges, but then also work toward a better national data set that can represent tribes generally and hopefully promote greater funding and greater, not just funding, but mechanisms for addressing that need in specific areas. I put this picture up because this is the Rosebud Sioux Tribe's IT department. And it's in the Red Log building on the reservation. And I just wanted to put it up initially to kind of show where we're starting from. You know, this is a very old building. It looks very similar on the inside as it does on the outside. But part of why I show this is the starting point. But I've been working with this tribe, among others, for a while now. And so we started in with data collection and started training in field data collection and identifying what the managers needed, what they wanted. We also trained the field staff for the housing authority itself and other programs as to how to use tablet devices, use the digital forms in the field. So they can map features, they can quantify resources, they can ask qualitative questions of tenants and residents to see what their experience has been like and have different ways of viewing that information. It can be limited to program data, but eventually they could scale up to do their own full-scale census. This leads to full-scale data collection efforts, and this is just, there is a video of the Dakota Pilot Project that's available online if you want to see a little bit more about the project. Just type in Dakota Pilot Project. But basically what this leads to is specialized data collection efforts. So in all these different data collection projects, we start to look at the reservations themselves, the communities. We start to use different tools like aerial imagery to break apart the reservations into different parts and see how we want to best address them. One example of specialized data collection is the recent homeless counts, the point-in-time counts that go on in January, but also state-level efforts to count doubled-up populations. Most tribes are aware of the fact that tribes and tribal members experience this doubling up. Folks who are not counted as homeless by HUD in the point-in-time count because they're temporarily housed by a friend or family member. Some states, including South Dakota, promote doubled-up counts. Rosebud is currently, SWA Corporation of Rosebud is currently doing one of these doubled-up counts right now, in addition to combining it with a point-in-time count so that they can capture all that data at one time. And I want to recognize here, while I helped coordinate this and my staff helped coordinate this, they are the ones collecting the data on the ground. They're the ones bringing in the forms and doing this. Other things like surveys of off-reservation populations, which is very key for tribes where their population has moved to urban centers. Things like updating 911 maps. People are familiar with the fact that 911 is creating maps for E911 and different services that are provided in rural areas especially. But I put this image up here in part to show you how 911 often creates those maps. This is the image that they're looking at, probably in slightly greater detail. But unless you do work on the ground, this field data collection we're talking about, you don't know whether that's truly a house, whether it's been burned out, whether it's occupied or not occupied. You don't have the information you need to create an accurate map. So we work with 911 and the other programs to get the maps that they already have to save resources initially, but then update it and provide that back to them. It also helps for unifying addressing systems. Anyone familiar with reservations in the middle part of the country know that there could be 4 or 5 different addresses for the same housing unit. So there's also broader assessments of community needs and other specialized things that can flow from this. So then once you get into the data analysis and visualization phase, you have the ability then to incorporate GIS training into the training of office staff. So I don't have the slide, but I do have a picture of the Rosebud SWA Corporation staff in their GIS training Same group whose IT department works in the red log building, learning how to actually do the mapping. Not contract it out, not hire me to do it, but learn how to do the mapping for themselves. They can start to analyze the relationships within the data. This was also something that was part of the pilot project. So then the analysis and visualization helps to drive and depoliticize decision making, because you can bring these maps and this data to the decision making meetings. It also allows, as I think Carol's going to describe a little bit, the assessment of achievements and opportunities within current programs, measurement of how you're doing and the successes you've had. These are some products of the Dakota Pilot Project: a map of all housing units at Pine Ridge, for example, a map of radio reception coverage at Cheyenne River Indian Reservation. You can see in the lower left, this gives them the tools to determine how to increase radio reception in the southwest corner of their reservation when it's used for emergency management purposes. This is an example of qualitative presentation of data when they asked people what they wanted in their housing, how they wanted to change their housing. It calls out the things that were said most often. And there are different ways you can present that data. This is just one that's sort of visually appealing. This is Rosebud's count, by the way, for their doubled up and homeless count, them leading the charge on their own data collection. And this is Cheyenne River Housing Authority's GED program, Adult Learning Initiative. And I wanted to highlight it because this was another opportunity for us to take data that had been collected, that hadn't been analyzed, and say, look, let's take a look at it and see what you've achieved, what barriers you've brought down, what barriers still exist for your students. And so this was one way that they were able to say, hey, look, we've found that in our graduate students, they initially identified the financial issue as a tremendous barrier, but they graduated. So we must have been able to help solve that. There's ways that they could dig into this data and start to examine what they still needed to address and what they'd been successful addressing. So then you move into the data integration setting. And again, as I mentioned, it maximizes available tribal data. It brings programs together and coordinates their efforts in ways that many of them have never really done in the past. It promotes efficiency because they're not collecting the same information twice, which often happens. It illustrates relationships between features. So the second you lay water lines over the top of housing units, over the top of roads, these programs start to see that they may not be planning in the same direction. And so it gives them an opportunity to start to integrate those efforts, to integrate planning efforts in ways that they hadn't tried before. And this is something that the Rosebud Sioux Tribe right now is really working hard on, has brought 5 or 6 of the key players to the table, and has created a server at the tribal level and is working toward incorporating all the data in the same place. I won't go into too much detail about Tribal Census Bureau and statistics departments, but I will say to have a standing data collection entity that can create verifiable collection standards and adopt intertribal data collection protocols, and of course, the all-important limit the over-surveying of tribal members is really key. I can't also state enough that if they can serve as a bridge to the federal census, anyone who's worked on national level data collection understands how difficult that can be, and to maintain a continuing contact with the tribe is critically important. They also provide data security, and they can facilitate the integration of data sources as a standing entity to bring the data together, and of course send it back out in integrated format to the other programs. So as I mentioned at the beginning, what does this culminate in? Well, you have tribes that have this capacity to then view their data, integrate their data, collect their own data, and become not only users of data, but promote the economic development that was discussed earlier, because then they have all the tools available to create centers for investors and others to come and actually examine the lay of the land. They can fill gaps in existing data collection, for example, in unemployment and employment, where we don't really have a good source of information for that now. But then tribes can also engage to a greater degree in things like negotiated rulemaking and other processes where critically analyzing and scrutinizing existing data sources works better. It allows them to discuss the current definitions and terms and units of measurement and things like that, that at times when we discuss the census and we talk about fixing it or making changes to it that tribes want, or even promoting tribal data collection that can feed into a federal data source or a new tribal survey, or administrative data that tribes collect and use to supplement an existing federal source. All of these things become possible, but as Nancy mentioned, you have to start at the very beginning, send someone out with a tablet, and have them start collecting data and start mapping it. And eventually it culminates in these things. But what I'm here to talk about is that first step, is just getting tribes to understand that there shouldn't be as many barriers and obstacles to data collection as it seems like there are right now. And I'm glad to see that the federal government and some of the federal agencies are already, and NCAI and NEIHC and others, are starting to address this issue. And I appreciate you having me, and I'll pass it off to Carol Gore.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next presenter is Carol Gore, and as she says on her bio, I'm a proud Alaskan of Aleut descent. So that almost says it all about her, but there's a lot more to say. I've had the privilege of working with Carol over the past years as I've worked with other TDHEs, the designated housing authorities around the country. Carol is for the past 15 years, Carol has been at the helm of the Cook Inlet Housing Authority as president and CEO, leading the charge for responsible community development through innovation and collaboration. Carol's leadership at CIHA team has more than doubled its affordable rental housing from 267 units in 2000 to over 1,000 units owned and managed in 2015. I've also had the privilege of being in Anchorage in Alaska to see the progress and the really, really important impact that her good work has had within the community. So the next presenter, Carol, thank you.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see some friends in the crowd, and good morning to the people that I know are watching from Alaska. Yes, there's a 4-hour time difference. So when I had lunch today, I was actually having breakfast, just to give you a clue. I want to thank Todd Richardson for the invitation. It's really a privilege to be here. The purpose of my presentation is to provide evidence of the difference an Indian housing block grant approach that is based on self-determination has provided. My approach to our work began by seizing the idea that as Alaska Native people, we already know community better than anyone. We know it takes a village sharing all of its human and other resources to build a sustainable community. I wanted Cook Inlet Housing to lead the engagement and development of our neighborhoods, demonstrating that Alaska Native people could use housing to create the right opportunities to empower our people and build our community. I truly believe the self-determination of Nahasda allows us to lead our housing and community development at our diverse local levels to make systemic and sustainable change in Indian country. So this is going to look like a different slide than what you saw with the first presenter. This map demonstrates why we call the contiguous states the lower 48, and you might hear me say that in my presentation. Like Hawaii, we do not share land boundaries and are separated by miles of ocean from the rest of you. So if you were to drive from Seattle to Anchorage, Alaska on the Alaska Highway, it would take you just over 2 days to get there. Alaska's huge. And I think this is a much better map than the first map and better from the first presenter. It's so huge that it makes logistics like shipping and travel a nightmare. The climate is also very diverse, from maritime rainforest to Arctic desert. And the topography and environmental conditions range from permafrost, bedrock, tundra, mountains, oceans, rivers, flood zones, and more recently, global warming. You may notice Barrow at the very top of the map. TNHA serves this region. They partnered with Cold Climate Research to develop housing in villages that experience temperatures that are 60 below zero in the winter. The result was a design that uses 18% of the energy of a traditional home and will last 100 years or more. More than 30 homes have already been built in 30 villages. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this map. Might be difficult for you to see from where you're sitting, but I want you to get a sense of what the state is like. So Anchorage, where we are located, is circled in yellow on this map. It's kind of in the center, if you could see it. I don't know if this will work. Apparently I'm not coordinated enough. Our service area is the surrounding 45,000 square miles. The 4 communities that are circled in red are areas where we've either worked or they're going to be part of the presentation that's coming up. You can see by this map that Alaska has limited infrastructure. Few roads or large airports, limited water and sewer, and very expensive heating options. This lack of infrastructure makes it incredibly difficult and expensive to build new housing. Building materials must be shipped from Seattle, barged up rivers, or flown in on small planes. And for communities off the road system, materials can only be delivered when the ocean is free of ice and the rivers are open and full. Several early statistics from the draft PD&R report are worth sharing with you. Housing and plumbing in Alaska is especially vulnerable to extreme weather conditions. These conditions make it challenging to maintain and preserve existing housing. Alaska has been identified as one of 2 regions, along with Arizona and New Mexico, as having much worse housing quantity and quality problems when compared to other regions. Alaska exhibits the highest rates of Alaska Native overcrowding and highest rate of households with incomplete plumbing and lack of complete kitchen facilities. 54% of Alaska Native households in Alaska experience 1 or more housing problems. The next highest regional rate is 44% for Arizona, New Mexico, and California and Nevada. From our own state housing needs assessment, the rate of overcrowding in Alaska is twice as high as the national average, and the housing cost burden is highest in the Cook Inlet region where we're located. Sometimes being unique has its price, and I think this slide says it all. This slide provides a comparison of our cost of living and the house cost differential to 5 other like-sized towns with Alaska Native American Indian populations. Finally, some pictures. This series of slides captures the benefit of Nahasda through a series of before and after pictures to demonstrate the existing housing conditions and the difference the diverse housing we are building has made for our families and communities. Our goal was to do more than just build housing. We wanted to catalyze better and safer community with educational and economic outcomes. We built studio, 1, 2, 3, and 4-bedroom rental homes. We built single-family homes in a rent-to-buy model and for immediate home ownership. We built homes for individuals, families, and elders. We built buildings with both housing and small business incubator space. We removed the blight of homes that were known locations for drugs and crime and replaced them with homes that were safe and energy efficient. We removed contaminated gas stations and replaced them with mixed-use buildings that were catalysts for new economic investments such as credit unions and schools and jobs. We built homes our people needed that resulted in stabilizing families and communities. To capture the real history of Indian housing, consider having someone who lives in Phoenix design a home for someone living in Barrow. That actually happened. Or perhaps even more interesting for you to consider, having someone who lives in Nome design a home for you in Washington, D.C. You may not like the aesthetics, but it will be highly energy efficient, I can assure you. Today, Nahasda is allowing Native people to address our specific and diverse housing needs using the strategies and designs that are most effective in our tribal communities, rather than strategies mandated by well-intentioned officials working in offices thousands of miles away. This slide reflects our own journey in Indian housing. 23 years of pre-NAHASDA production, we built 811 units, or about 34 units a year. 13 years under post-NAHASDA, we built over 1,600 units, or an average of 124 homes a year. NAHASDA tripled production of housing compared to the 1937 Act. Over 110,000 housing units have been built, acquired, or rehabbed according to HUD. The greatest rate of increase in Indian country came from Alaska. According to the PD&R Interim Housing Study, thank you, Nancy, the number of tribal area housing units in Alaska increased by 23% from 2000 to 2010 as compared to a 14% increase nationwide. NAHASDA has allowed Alaska to begin addressing its inadequate housing problems. Although Alaska still has the highest incomplete plumbing and kitchen rates in the nation, those rates decreased by 6 to 7 points over this same period. The next couple of slides are really about leveraging to show you what we're doing with our NAHASDA beyond just building homes and how we're leveraging it. With our ARA and NAHASDA funds, and you might remember ARA was several years ago when really our funding was almost doubled in 1 year's time for a one-time event. With these ARA and NAHASDA funds, we could have built housing for 8 elders. Instead, through leveraging, we built 59 units of affordable senior housing, leveraging fair housing funds to house 24 elders instead of 8. The chart is an example of some of the funding sources the ARA funds helped us attract for leverage, where we were able to turn $1 into 10. ARA and NAHASDA were the first funds in and represented just 12% of the funding sources. Yet without this first-in funding, this housing would not have been built. This is another 80-unit family development that was built by leveraging NAHASDA at about 20% of the total development costs. My goal here is to demonstrate the complexity of the leveraging tribes are demonstrating today, evidence of our increased capacity to identify resources and mix the funding sources to build the housing we need. NAHASDA catalyzed this outcome of growing capacity and increasing production. Before I present an example of a complex rural development, I want to set the stage by sharing how Alaska is working together. We have over 240 federally recognized tribes and 8 primary native ethnic groupings. These ethnic groupings are how we self-identify: Aleut, Athabascan, Yupik, Tlingit, Haida, Inupiat, Eyak, and Tsimshian. The names of our 240 federally recognized tribes are place-based names and not reflective of how we self-identify as Alaska Native. Our congressional land settlement in 1972 established 12 regions or land areas. They're represented on this map. We do not have a reservation-based system like other lower 48 tribes. There is just one small reservation in the state that's located in southeast Alaska. In Alaska, we recognize the diversity of our environments and traditionally work through regional entities. That is the case for housing, where there are 12 regional housing authorities that were created to address the Indian housing needs in the state. With more minimum funded tribes than any other region, the tribes often work together to pool their resources to provide funding. One example of how they are working together is the Chalista region, which is the poorest and has the lowest income of anywhere in the state. That's where AVCP Regional Housing Authority works with 52 tribes. Rather than try to save multiple years of NAHASDA funding to build one home, AVCP worked with these 52 tribes, to pool their funds and build 40 homes a year, 5 homes in each of 8 villages. They use local labor and rotate the village locations each year. So the rotation results in 5 homes every 6 years or so for every village. Another example is Aleutian Housing. They use NAHASDA to grow their capacity to deliver non-federal programs. They were able to deploy state funding to remote community of Atka, where they provided weatherization services, resulting in an annual cost savings of over $4,100 for each person each year. The AVCP Housing Authority out of Bethel invited us to help them develop a 19-unit family development in Hooper Bay, where there had been a disastrous fire. Hooper Bay is located on the most western coast of Alaska, a very harsh environment. But AVCP brought the local know-how, and we brought the expertise to develop and operate a complex housing development. We continue to partner with them to support their low-income housing tax credit compliance. These modular homes were built in Anacortes, Washington, barged through the inside passage, and around the Aleutian Islands, where the barge then anchored off the coast where Hooper Bay is located. The barge also carried a crane to lift the homes in place because there was no dock or other equipment. We used local labor to knit the homes together. You'll notice the homes are built on steel pilings. That's because they're built on very sensitive tundra and permafrost. We know that leveraging money is important. There simply is not enough money to meet our needs, but we think equally important is leveraging capacity, and we believe there is a need for more tribes to collaborate where they have capacity limitations so that they can experience and grow their own capacity. With all our success, challenges still exist, and I thought nothing could present that better than this slide. Flat funding is problematic as our dollar is shrinking and our developments require maintenance and operating support. And so our level of production is likely to shrink and stall unless the funding is increased. Due to inflation, Nahasda's purchasing power has been reduced by nearly half since the first Indian housing block grants were awarded in 1998. Tightening federal budgets have made it even more challenging for Indian housing providers to find the resources necessary to improve housing conditions in tribal communities. In 2015, the Indian Housing Block Grant appropriation is just 1.5% larger than the amount Congress appropriated 14 years ago in 2001. Finally, I wish to introduce myself properly. I am the great-granddaughter of Elizabeth Kwasnikoff and Fedosia Komkoff. I'm the granddaughter of Charles Joe Cooper and Sasha Alexandria Crawford. It always makes me emotional. I'm the proud daughter of Erna Cooper and Richard Welton. My mom grew up as one of 12 children in a one-bedroom home. Her parents in the bedroom and the children in the attic, boys on one side and girls on the other. I grew up loving my mom's family for their spirit, their ingenuity, and mostly their laughter. They were always working together to make a better place where everyone mattered and everyone was essential. At Cook Inlet Housing, I saw an opportunity to use housing to build this same spirit in the neighborhoods of my community where neighbors and people could be so much more. So for me, our work demonstrates what great things can come from a community that is led by Native people who work together. Thank you for the privilege.
Thank you, Carol, and certainly Kevin and Nancy. What we want to do now is start a little conversation among the panelists, but we also want to entertain questions from the folks here. I think we have the ability to have questions come in from the field. Is that correct? Okay, good. That'd be great. So my observation in these three presentations is I think we couldn't have had more of a diverse group looking at different things different ways. And so what I wanted to do was maybe put on the table for discussion about institutional building, capacity, leveraging, sustainability, and certainly in the long run, how do we measure success in what we're doing? And I thought Kevin made a really important observation, and because I think this is true, has been true throughout Indian country, given the state of the economy. And his point is that right now, some data collection is used for funding, and funding alone maybe. It's become very competitive. and understandably so. And then he migrated into, I think, what I would consider capacity building to work with folks. I think, but then how do we tie all this together? How do we tie the data collection, the analysis, so that we eventually create greater sustainability within our communities and within our economies? I think the important thread through all of this is housing and housing development. A lot of times folks don't realize, and I think it was demonstrated quite well, that housing really is economic development. And a lot of folks, I think, in our communities still think of housing as a social venture, whereas where it really helps, it's an instrument that is used to build economies, to build sustainability within the communities. And I know there are very interesting examples of how that evolves. And so I'd like to ask the panelists to just think about that a minute. And maybe if I could start with Carol to talk about your experience. And then the measuring of success also is very important. So if you could just sort of address that briefly.
Well, we've been working in one community for more than 10 years. It was a community that hit the front page of the paper with every bad news story you can imagine. And yet, it was the neighborhood where there were more Alaska natives living than most of the villages in Alaska. So we began to work with that neighborhood, and we took a different approach, really being more strategic and taking out the blight and trying very hard not to lose the character of the neighborhood, though that was hard to find in the beginning. But our goal was really to make sure that we were doing more than just sprinkling nice homes in an old neighborhood that was a place where nobody wanted to live. We wanted that neighborhood to change, and we wanted economic opportunity to come to that neighborhood. So at the end of 8 years, we did a social and economic impact study, really to detect whether or not there was any evidence our work had mattered to that neighborhood. And we looked at educational outcomes. Reading, writing, and math scores went up 20 to 80%. The number of people who had lived in that neighborhood 5 years or more was at 50%. We started at 5. The crime had gone up. But the reason it had gone up, according to the police, is because suddenly people cared. They were picking up the phone and calling the police, and they weren't afraid to call them. We made sure the homes that we built had eyes on the street, kind of a crime prevention design principle, so they didn't have to leave the safety of their home to call the police. What was a surprise to us was the fire department, who said, golly, we hardly come here anymore because you've taken out all the old structures. I think the difference it made to the people that live there, there's now a credit union. There's now a brand new middle school that had been built in the 50s and was fraught with buckets in the hallways. And now the city has put in new streets and safety barriers and lights on the street and benches where nobody ever dared to even walk the streets, much less sit on a bench. So I think it's really important that the data look at the difference we're making to people. While we're building housing, it's really about people. And the idea that maybe Congress only counts the number of units we build is really counterintuitive to why we're all invested in this work. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, Kevin, given your experience and I think it's really, what you've demonstrated today was really the tribe taking the initiative to build the capacity to collect this data. And I think it's important to think then beyond that, where does this go? And I think you sort of started talking a little bit about the next steps, but in comparison maybe to what Carol has been doing and the outcome of that, can you talk a little bit about with the eventual next steps for these communities that you've been working with?
Yeah, a big part of measuring success is figuring out how you would define success. And there's a difference between just managing a program just to sort of, make sure that you're in compliance versus truly achieving success. And I think one of the best things that comes about from just building the data collection analysis capacity is you ask the questions. What are your unique challenges here for this tribe, for this reservation? What are we working, one, to overcome? What are your goals, and how would you define or measure whether you've achieved them? And so you get to crystallize that. Yeah. But and that may be at a individual program level. But then when we talk about the integration at the tribal level, that's where it gets really fun, to be honest with you, because then you realize that it isn't just about building those 6 homes, it's about building those 6 homes in the right place in conjunction with water resources and transportation and economic development so that it is coordinated and so that everyone's definitions of success get tied together. And so it's sort of tribal success rather than programmatic. And I think for me, that's when we really know that we're achieving something, is when the different programs are in the room talking about the same ways of measuring success.
And Nancy, I know that you're not on the development side, but you certainly, I think, the work that you have done, and especially, very importantly, the housing needs assessment that you folks are doing. How, what, through this data collection, and what's your vision, or what do you think then, how do we use this data?
Yeah, well, I think, as Kevin has said, I think there is a way to look at data as a way to bring people to the table and to bring people together. Some of that has even happened in trying to do the survey in certain places where they don't have good 911 lists or address lists. The housing authority doesn't have a full list. The 911 department doesn't have a full list. There's somebody else in another department that does mapping and geography, and so getting those people to talk to each other. It's not that they don't want to talk to each other, but you have to have a reason. They have to feel like they're going to get something of use out of spending the time sitting around the table. So I think that having some data and sharing it and learning with others is a way to do that. I think also that whole idea of saying, well, I don't just want a better way to count the number of houses that need rehab, because that's what you require for my annual report. I also want to talk to people in the community and say, well, what else should we measure to see if we're going to be doing something useful here? So you bring in people from other departments or from the community to say, okay, fine, count the number of houses, but also count this and look at how many people went to school, look at how many businesses open, look at things like that. So I think it's a way to bring people together as well.
I agree. It was very interesting. I know that when I was up in Alaska, and I was talking to Carol, and we went out to look at the development that she mentioned in her presentation. Something that really struck me and stood out was the measurement. How do we measure that success? And a lot of times we do it just by the numbers. How many homes were built, how many new homes were rehabbed, but we forget about the fact that this has a huge impact on communities. And one area that struck me very much, and that I really started thinking more about, was health and education and safety. And I think that in this particular situation, they began to find that the retention rates in school were going up. And health was improving, and all of that had to do with the fact that they were reducing overcrowding, and overcrowding is a huge issue throughout Indian country. So we here at ONAP, we began to really think, in addition to just counting widgets, we're beginning to really look at the outcome and the improvement within the communities, and then I think the challenge. And it's not impossible, but I think there is a challenge about how do we sustain all of this? How do we really put all this to work so that it is passed down, from generation to generation of workers in some kind of institutional body? I think that institution is extremely important. I think Kevin mentioned that now they have an IT organization or office. That's in itself is an institution. TDHEs, the designated housing entities, are an institution within tribal communities. So that really begins to help add sustainability lending institutions are also other forms of ways of stabilizing communities and adding to the value of the communities. And a good story, it really pleased me to hear this, having worked over at Treasury and on the CDFI fund. Carol alluded to the fact that a new credit union has come in, but what she forgot to tell you is that the financial institutions within the community were pawn shops. And that is so relevant throughout Indian country. You know, predatory lending is huge. And so this whole new development literally chased the pawn shops out of the community, and a credit union popped in. So, you know, that's another form of measurement that we are looking at. So we're broadening our analysis and our evaluation of the success of our programs. And of course, that success really happens within the respective tribal communities. So I appreciate your comments, your presentation today, and I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience here, as well as from those who are looking at it from the webinar.
There we go. We have a question from our webcast audience. Ben Henderson writes, "Thank you to all for this excellent discussion. As a descendant of Mexican indigenous forebears and as a community development professional, I have been interested in supporting sustainable development on Indian lands for many years. What advice would you have for a young-ish professional wanting to find work addressing these issues?"
So, was that a statement or a question? Was that a statement or a question? I couldn't hear very well.
Oh, no, Mr. Henderson writes, "What advice would you have for a youngish professional wanting to find work addressing these issues?" Apparently, he is a community development professional with an interest in supporting sustainable development on Indian lands.
Cool. Kevin, do you want to take a shot at that?
Well, maybe I'm biased, but I would say there are certain tools of the trade that you employ in any community development planning mode, and as I mentioned earlier, you know, there's certain geographic information software and different things like that you at least have to become literate in to really start to take advantage of the data that's collected. And then I think one of the things that really would separate a person in community planning is that once you have those tools, ensuring that you don't lose connection with the community. Because I think that's one of the real strengths is when you find somebody who has those technical tools, but can then step back out of the office and reconnect with those that they're trying to serve. I think they're of highest value.
Carol?
I would just add that a skill set is good listening. Before we launched our work, we spent 2 years listening and trying to navigate what we were being told and connect that to existing data. So we really had a foundation of what they were saying and validating what they were saying by using data, which gave them credibility with funders. It gave them credibility in the community. And if you use your tools in a way that demonstrates you're sensitive to the culture, that you are willing to listen, and you're willing to go back a second time and ask, did I get it right? Don't make assumptions about what you heard, because in some cultural places, the way people frame things is intended to detect whether or not you are really the listener you are pretending to be. So I would just suggest don't ever take anything for granted and listen, listen, listen. Thank you.
I don't think there's too much more to add to that. I think there are a lot of good nonprofit organizations all around local communities that one could get started with, still needing to bring those technical skills and the listening skills, but there's a lot of people out there that you can just learn a tremendous amount from, so I'd just add that.
Roger, can I add one thing? Just adding on to what Nancy mentioned, I think looking at case studies and sort of exploring positive examples of community development and looking at process. A lot of times people just look purely at the building or the development that resulted, and it's important to look at how they went about doing that. Because if it's a truly reflective structure or design for the community, then they did other things right along the way.
Thank you. Todd?
Todd Richardson from HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research. I want to thank all of you for accepting our invitation to come here today. So this has been really helpful. In fact, I think, as you know, I've worked with you on a lot of these issues over the years, and I've learned a lot today that I didn't know before. And one of the questions that came to mind that I hadn't really thought about before this presentation is perhaps you can talk a little bit about what you think the impact Nahaza has had on architecture in tribal areas. So when I travel to tribal areas, I feel like there's a pre-Nahazda architecture and a post-Nahazda architecture. And I wonder if any of you have the same impression.
Your issue first.
I'll take that first, Todd. I tried to politely allude to the change. Truly, pre-Nahazda, there was one house that was prescribed by HUD that had been vetted by national architects. That design had one door. I can tell you in Alaska, no carpet was allowed because we finally had to argue that it was insulation. So that one-size-fits-all home was built in Arizona, it was built in Alaska, California, Texas, it was built everywhere. Then along came Nahazda. So what were the differences? We were able to adapt to a northern climate. So energy efficiency for us was a top priority. I might share one story. When I first came to my job 15 years ago, I read in Nahazda that we were able to build culturally respectful housing. And I thought, well, what does that mean? So I went to my local HUD office and I said, could you please define this for me? And they said, well, you know, it's like the housing you grew up in. And I said, you're kidding me. Why would I build that? Celotex, Visqueen on the windows, a coal-fired stove. There are cultural housing designs, but for the most part, when we talk about need, people need something that's safe from the environment, that's energy efficient, that protects their family, that gives them enough bedrooms so they're not overcrowded. It's fairly simple. And being able to build a house that has 5 bedrooms, because that's the family size instead of the prescribed 3-bedroom home for every family, no matter the size, has been a real blessing. I guess that's how I would respond to the architectural designs. Certainly there are some local preferences, and you saw many different designs when I showed pictures. We were trying to stretch the envelope and look for things that are simple, inexpensive to build. So while we stretch and test those principles, we still want to think about what's right for the people that are going to live there.
I think, you know, there's a movement away from some of the cluster housing in a lot of places where that was built earlier. As Carol mentioned, the flexibility to actually decide what it is that you want, what your residents want, both cultural sensitivities, but also just in terms of layout for the sizes of families. The energy efficiency, I think, has been big for several years now, and almost every tribe that I talk to is really keenly aware of it. And I think modular housing and other things like that, in an effort to reduce prices, you know, quality modular housing, not what we think of in the past. And actually tribes building housing not just for their own reservation and tribal members, but as a commercial enterprise, so that they can sell those units affordably to other reservations and tribes nearby. And those are some things that I think jump out to me.
it's hard for me to compare pre and post in the houses since I haven't been following the housing that long. But there are definitely, I've seen a lot, and as I've gone around, particularly the focus on the energy efficiency. But there seems to be, when I talk to housing authorities, a lot of making it not only comfortable and safe, but making it easier for the families that are actually living in the houses. You know, a little easier to maintain, a little safer in terms of grab rails, things like that for elders, you know, just extra features like that. And I know when I did the tour with you, I loved the fact that the turnkey house was really turnkey, meaning there were window shades already, there were nice countertops because the neighbors don't like it when somebody hangs a sheet in the window because it's going to take them a while before they can buy curtains or window shades. So just things like that. There's sometimes small touches, but having some flexibility in funding and decisions really helps meet the community needs.
I think from my own experience and having spent a lot of time on my own reservation, there was always this stigma about the HUD home. And, oh, you must live in a HUD home, or see that home over there. There was a clear architectural distinction in the design. Today, it's really changed. And it's changed because of our program and based on self-determination, the tribes really then decide for themselves, you know, what kind of housing they're going to have. And in some areas around the country, I have the advantage of, you know, looking around the country from my office. And if you look at the beginning of time, housing was really, I mean, the integration of the culture, the building materials really defined the homes that people lived in. And it varied from the Northwest to Alaska to the Southwest to New England and the South. And you can see, if you look at the historical, many of the homes reflected the region and the cultures of that respective area. And what's happening now, though, is that a lot of tribes are going back and they're looking at the traditional housing, the long house up in the Northwest, and they are replicating that using modern building materials, but designs are sort of almost the same. But the important thing is it's a reflection now of the respective tribe, and so you see that beginning to evolve, and I hope that stays that way.
I'm Day Jackson. I am one of the few people here who was associated with that first study that's on PD&R's side. I think the term culturally relevant came out of that first study. My question is directed to Nancy. Nancy, when this study, I believe, is an evaluation, so does the current study of the IHBG, and I'm wondering the needs part of it, and looking at the availability side of needs, are you at all looking at programs of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, if the HIP is still around, I'm not sure if it's still around or not, or those programs of the USDA, Rural Development, and how they might factor into the supply of housing, and I'm not sure of the Indian Health Service, and whether or not some of those programs, how they are factoring to, whether or not you're looking at some of that for this time. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for the question. There are a few places where we touch on that. The study is really focused on the housing assistance through NAHASTA, but when on the actual survey, both for the tribal housing, the TDHEs that are surveyed, they are asked about other sources of both funding and assistance and other programs that they coordinate with for housing. So we do hear about some of those other programs. And then we get into more of that on some of the site visits where, you know, people have said, oh, also go over and talk to these folks from Rural Development that partner with us, or go talk to these folks who run the shelter, you know, so we can get a fuller picture while we're out there. So on a smaller number of sites, we're able to learn about those as well.
Hello, I'm Peter Ashley with HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes. So we look at the connection between homes and health. And I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit. Carol, you talked about, well, both of you talked about energy efficient homes, and that's certainly makes a lot of sense. But you have to be careful, of course, when you tighten up a home that you preserve the air quality and you don't have moisture build up. Mold, of course, is bad for health, and you need if you're burning, if you have wood stoves, et cetera, you get a lot of contaminants building up. So I'm wondering, when you're designing the energy efficient homes, how you're accounting for indoor environmental quality. Thanks.
Got my green light. Thanks for that question. We build to a 5-star and have recently moved to a 6-star energy rating. Mold was a huge issue, especially in the original HUD homes. So a lot of our early money from NAHASDA was spent in rehabbing those homes to get the right ventilation, because they were truly over-insulated, and people didn't understand the design, I think, early on. But I think I would also say that this is true of maybe a lot of folks in Indian country. We're also building very green. And we were doing so before it was sort of romantic to do so, because having not just an energy efficient home, but something that's low maintenance made a lot of sense. We want our homes to last. You heard me talk about a 100-year-old home. But using green technology and recycled materials has been especially important in a northern climate like Alaska. You might find this hard to believe, but we recently put a solar installation that's the largest residential install in Alaska on a senior housing development, and we're eager to see the first year's result, but we think it's going to save us upwards of 40% of our energy costs on our boiler system. So even in Alaska, we can try solar. We're doing geothermal on our next development, but that's in part that sustainability equivalent, and really trying to get into the weeds of what's the boiler system. I think self-determination allowing us to do that research, which windows. We have triple and quadruple pane windows in some homes where we've been forced to do so, or it's made sense from an energy perspective. I will say all that costs a lot of money. And the cost per unit on a home raises eyebrows when we're doing that kind of work, but I think it makes good sense from a sustainability perspective. Thank you.
That segues neatly into our next question from the webcast audience. Amar Ascari with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency writes, could the panelists speak to the role of banks in facilitating housing development, and what can banking regulators do to increase bank participation in this area?
I didn't hear the question.
Just the tail end.
I can run it again if you like. The question is, could the panelists speak to the role of banks in facilitating housing development, and what can banking regulators do to increase bank participation in this area?
You want to go for that? You're in the leveraging part.
Well, I think banks have played a critical part. Like any investor, they want to see us walk first. But I will say we've become a pretty interested investment from banks. So from their CRA departments, they have a little bit of granting. We've also become a CDFI, which is where Roger was before he came to HUD. As a CDFI, we're now a member of the Federal Home Loan Bank system. All of that gives us access to funding sources to help us leverage other banking resources. We do carry traditional debt, but not very much of it. If you looked at our leveraging on the slides I showed, about the maximum we can use is 10 to 15%. But there's also a construction loan in between that a bank would have pretty serious interest in carrying that for the larger developments. I think banking in Indian country is starting to take its force, but it's more difficult on reservation-based tribes where there are trust land issues. The new passage of the Hearth Act, I think, will help relieve some of that tension on the trust lands. But banking is interested in Indian country, and I will say NAHASDA has had a lot to do with that. we can use our NAHASDA money to guarantee that debt, and that's been very meaningful to Indian country. We're now exercising the courage to really take on that debt where Indian country didn't do that 15 years ago. I hope that answers the question.
I just want to add just one more thing, just to stay tuned on the home buyer side. We do have a study coming out, a survey of lenders doing mortgage lending in Indian country, and the 184 program that is managed by ONAP. So it's coming.
And one last question, Elizabeth Koch with our building technology part of policy development and research. I think it's fantastic that local communities and the Native American community are undertaking some of their own research. But what can we do to help that? What is the research you would like HUD to do that would assist you in any of the efforts that the three of you have discussed this afternoon?
Want me to take that? Well, I think that one of the things that we're working on from the tribal side is this development of sort of protocols and things that would help, unified protocols to help develop data collection practices across reservations, across tribes. And I think PD&R can help sort of, guide that process and provide some resources for just explaining some of the basic elements of data collection. I guess I would think of something like the labor force report, where at one point in time there was an effort to do some tribal data collection, and it was recognized that there were certain aspects of it that weren't providing a verifiable or accurate data set. I think taking another shot at something like that and promoting tribal data collection and a connection between tribal data collection and federal programs, maybe a kind of baby steps approach would be a great way to start.
Roger,
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
could I add just one thing, because that's such a generous offer? I do think the needs assessment study that's being done might be a good baseline for us to think about what are the next steps in data. Really looking at social and economic data, much as Kevin's described, might be the next set of data. There's a really absence of that sort of data in tribal country in general. And so having some baseline would help us articulate our need to Congress in a much deeper way than we're able to today. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one more question.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question about the structure that is employed today in both Alaska and in the lower 48 as far as housing authorities are concerned. When the Alaska Native Settlement Claims Act was done in about '74, there was great expectation that the corporations would be able to take a forward step away from what the Tlingit Heides were doing in terms of their housing authority handbook. So what's the structure today in terms of what the 14 corporations are doing in the housing business?
I'm going to try to make this a short answer. So let me give you just the 3 steps. So first, we're 8 indigenous groups, Aleut, Athabascan, et cetera. Then in 1972, Congress settled our land claims largely because of the gas line. So we were far behind the curve from the lower 48 tribes, and they formed 14 corporations and over 200 village corporations, and we all became shareholders. Then along in 1996, the federal government recognized us, and they recognized 240 federally recognized tribes. So you wonder why we're confused and why the lower 48 tribes are confused about us. That's the brief history. As for the corporations are really for profit, and that's what Congress intended. So when we do our housing, we are independent of those 14 regional corporations. We're also independent of those village corporations. I serve a board of 5, and they work independently. So all of the regional housing authorities work in that fashion. The corporations themselves, some of them have been, just like any other business, some of them have been hugely successful and others have not been so. Some of them distribute dividends and most do not. But I can tell you that most of them, profit or not, have formed an educational foundation where they're investing in scholarships and that sort of thing, and that's how most of us are grooming people to succeed us. So they have made investments in that education, but they're entities that are housing under BIA, that would be a separate entity, and under Indian Health Service is another separate entity. So they're working independently, but we collaborate, I guess is the way I would say that. I don't know if I've answered the question, but it is a unique relationship with Congress that we enjoy in Alaska.
Thank you, Carol. And with that, I would like to thank the panel and our discussion today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jean Lynn Powell, the General Deputy Assistant Secretary in PD&R, and let's really give a warm round of applause to all of our speakers today. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. It was truly an informative panel discussion. We actually have a number of questions on email and via Twitter that we weren't able to get to. But with that, I wanted to put in a plug for HUDuser.org. We just published a recent report in February on sustainable building technologies in Indian country. And I know that we had a lot of discussion about design and building, so I encourage all of you to check our report out. And of course, our interim report on the housing needs assessment is available, and in the coming months, we will have the final report. Our next quarterly will be in June, and it will be on regional planning, and we will also have a partner publication in Evidence Matters on that very same topic. So stay tuned, and I hope you can join us again for the next quarterly. Thank you.